Hi, you're listening to Photofocus. I'm your host, Rich Harrington, and this is the June 15th edition. And joining me this week is co-host Scott Bourne. How you doing, Scott?
I am still here despite predictions of my demise.
Well, good.
Or something like that.
Good to have you back. A big week for new gear for photographers. Lots of announcements, new products shipping, and you and I both have had a chance to play with some of it as well as look at it in depth. I think one of the things that was on a lot of folks' mind was the new Apple announcements. We have new technology and a lack of new technology, and both things are causing a lot of conversation. Let's start with the good first, the new MacBook Pros. I must admit, I've actually already ordered one. They look quite interesting. I suspect you're already in line too?
Yes, already in line.
So the Retina display, this is obviously a big change. Adding in...
Yeah, have you seen it yet, by the way?
I have not gone to an Apple store to see it yet, but after seeing the difference between an iPad and the iPad with the Retina display and the phone with, I'm just assuming that it's the same sort of jump.
It's really nice. I have seen it. But as far as being in line, just so I can clarify, I'm waiting 30 to 60 days until after you get yours and experience all the various problems that come with every brand new technology Apple delivers. And once those are ironed out and Apple says, oh, what? There was no problem. See, here's a brand new one. There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
I'll wait until that point.
Yeah, I pulled the trigger, but I ordered a custom configuration, which slows the process down to about 4 weeks. I think one of the biggest things, before we talk about the display, is actually more so than any other MacBook prior. This thing is a sandwich that's already made. There is no room in it for any changes. You can't modify it after the fact. So if you're thinking, well...
The hard drive is glued in.
The RAM is soldered to the board. You can't change the RAM. So it's like, if you're going, well, maybe I'll save some bucks and I'll do that 16 gigabyte RAM upgrade later. So I would tell everybody, suck it up and buy the RAM now, because RAM is the one thing, as software applications keep getting more multi-threads and multiple processors and all that jazz, RAM is the thing that hurts people the most. On my current MacBook Pro, I hit the 8 gigabyte ceiling all the time, where I start having a couple apps open and things hang. So you have to do that, and none of the standard configurations have that. The ones they're carrying in the store, it doesn't look like they're carrying the 16 gig. That's a build-to-order option, so you need that. I can't emphasize that enough to folks, that you really want to pull the trigger there.
Now, here's the really bad news. I do have mine sitting in the configured bin.
Yeah.
And not including... I think tax, it came to $4,080 with
which options did you get? You went to 768, didn't you? Yeah, okay.
I got everything. That's what I do. But I'm just saying, it's going to be the most expensive laptop I ever buy. And it's about $4,000. It's going to be about $4,500 with tax.
And it might be the last MacBook Pro you ever buy.
It may. But let's talk about what's on here. There's no 17-inch version, which has been the favorite of photographers for years.
Now, that's a tough one, because the screen resolution is higher than the 17-inch one was. So in a way, are you going to notice? But if you've got people sitting over your shoulder and you're trying to share images on set and you're doing review, I think that may become an issue.
I'm sorry, I've heard this argument from everybody already, and I was like, yes, you're going to notice, because 2 inches bigger is 2 inches bigger. and physics are physics. There. I know, I'm just saying. I have a million one-liners that I'm not saying at the moment, but 2 inches bigger is 2 inches bigger, and you can't convince me that it's not going to make a difference. Now, not everybody carried a 17-inch MacBook Pro around. I did for years.
I downgraded to the 15-inch after my chiropractic visits went up to one a week.
And when the MacBook Airs got so fast, I switched to those personally. So it's not a blow to me, but I heard a lot of complaints about it, and it seems like... Here's the broader topic, which we'll just weave into this, is that there's no 17-inch.
There's no express card slot.
There's no express card slot. And let's keep going. There's only a minor bump to Aperture, only a minor bump to the current Mac Pros, and we have the Final Cut Pro turned into iMovie debacle. Vis-a-vis, Apple is now a consumer mobile company. It doesn't care about professionals.
Well, let's delay that for just a second here and talk about some of the good things in this laptop. Then we will get onto that.
Cover the good things.
No, you left a couple out. You left a couple out. There's a couple things that I like. The fact that there's two Thunderbolt ports
That is
and an
that is
HDMI port is good because HDMI is really easy to adapt to things like DisplayPort, and you can get HDMI to DVI. So this means that if you need to use an external monitor, you can plug into that port and then leave the Thunderbolt ports just for storage or peripherals, which is going to give you more options and more flexibility.
Well, let me ask you right now about that, Rich, because I did have questions about that for you because you're,
I'm
being
a
a
geek.
video geek guy. With an HDMI port, if I have an HDMI TV, can I hook it up to that?
Yes.
Now that is freaking awesome because that means my 15-inch MacBook Pro will now be a 75-inch big screen.
You could do that with your old one. There were third-party adapters that went DisplayPort to HDMI. The difference between DisplayPort and HDMI and DVI, they're all terribly similar with how they handle data. It's just like some have embedded audio while DVI didn't, and
I know, but it'll just be more fun that there's just a direct cable connect to
it's
it.
easier.
So
Yeah, no dongles, no adapters. And so that makes that really convenient. And USB 3 is actually huge. I am more happy about USB 3 than I am the second Thunderbolt port because,
yeah, but isn't I mean like isn't that kind of like it finally?
oh, I know it is a finally. It's finally, you mean I can get affordable storage that's 5 times faster than FireWire 800? Yeah, I'm good with that. you know. So for those who are out there looking, obviously, Scott, you've invested in Thunderbolt disk arrays. I've seen the Promise array on your desk. It's sweet as heck, and but not everybody can buy that. Nor, that's something that involves an investment and a little bit of planning and budgeting. We are seeing more Thunderbolt disk solutions come onto the market. I just saw a new product from a company that you're not crazy about that has Thunderbolt and USB 3 on the back finally for the Drobos, which a lot of photographers like.
Boo.
I know. I'll move on from that topic, but we are seeing more and more storage options with USB 3, and I think that this is good that we have this. The other thing that's a big gotcha for folks is they changed the power adapter. Yet again, Apple has another proprietary one. So, but at least they had enough common sense that they're selling a $10 MagSafe 1 to MagSafe 2 adapter. I've already ordered 4 of them because I have
Yeah,
these power supplies everywhere. My desk, my home,
yeah,
my
I got
bed.
7 or 8 easy of these power supplies, so that's good. That's
Yeah.
good that they did that because I think there'd have been oh, they did it to us again.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Apple,
no,
the land of forgotten adapters and plugs.
and there's a 1 gigabyte memory graphics card on there, which will uh,
Everything.
help
Yeah.
everybody in the photo community that uses,
Photoshop has
stuff.
tons of acceleration for that now, and maybe Aperture will some point too.
Yeah. Well, I think Aperture is GPU dependent,
Yeah,
as are most photo apps these days. So having a good graphics card is nice. Having all flash memory, I got to tell you, I'm addicted to it. I've been all flash on my laptops for a couple of years now, and you just press the button and everything comes on.
yeah.
There's no boot up time. It's like, and then you go to use one of your old computers, and you're like, wow, what's wrong with this thing? It's not on yet. Is it broke? It's very fast storage. For small jobs, obviously, it'll be nice to have that speed. You won't be able to, import 1080p 4444 directly into your flash memory for more than a couple of minutes. But
Yeah.
you know,
You're,
it's
you're kind of making me not regret doing the 768 bump on the internal storage, but it was definitely a price option. So I was,
yeah, it's pricey, but I went for it, and that's what I'm going to have. And this laptop hopefully we'll use for a while. It's pretty fast, and but I think we'll have to wait and see once they come out, what all the various, though of course will be the numerous rumors that there's some sort of yellow cast on the display, and
yeah.
just like every new camera lens back focuses. But the bottom line is, I think it's going to be the only thing that I saw out of this current Apple announcement that I'm truly excited about. And there are some nice things to iOS 6, which I think will help us all. And I do think that the new operating system will be good. But the major disappointment is, Aperture got a point upgrade instead of, like
A full
catching
upgrade.
a
Yeah.
full upgrade. And it's like, And
And
here's
and
and
I'm
here it
I'm,
is.
look, I'm
I've been
looking at the
waiting.
specs for the
Wait a
Aperture
minute,
update. Oh,
but let me tell you, Rich, I've been waiting my whole life to say this because every pro photographer I know has just been on the edge of their seat waiting for Aperture and iPhoto library integration.
yeah. They added that a little bit before, like to make it easier to migrate, and now it's kind of like you don't have to choose. Just use both. They're awesome, and give us $79 more or $49 more, whatever they're charging for it now, and we'll let you move between. Yeah, if you look at the new features, here's what's scary. Um, a unified photo library for iPhoto and Aperture. So one photo library. Okay, yeah. Who cares? AVC HD video. Okay, even I don't care that there's more video support in Aperture. That's why I have other apps. Camera generated previews for faster browsing of RAW. About time. Highlights and shadows updated. Great. About time. Oh, good. There's an auto enhance button in the adjustments panel.
See, it's just here's the thing. I was there on day one. On day one when Aperture was launched.
Yeah.
And if you look at the marketing material, and you can use Go Wayback Machine to look at Apple's marketing materials, the word professional was used in every ad no less than 7 times. This is the professional photo application. And it cost $500, I think, when it was launched. And here we are talking about turning it into something that people who buy $200 point and shoots will love.
Well, here's the line that completely cements that for me. Minor terminology changes, including original instead of master and info instead of metadata, because metadata is such a scary word.
It's horrible. I updated it on one of my machines. I'm like, God, this is. It just pushed me. Everyone knows I've been thinking about switching to Lightroom 4. This announcement, or actually not non-announcement, they did it without even talking about it at the keynote. It just within minutes, I was on the red phone to the staff saying, "Staff, push the button."
Yeah.
And we started the transfer of 480,000 images into Lightroom catalog. So,
well, here's another one at the bottom that I'm just going to flag as a huge issue that I hate about the current Mac OS, that I have to go in and I actually hack the Mac OS to remove. You know how in the left-hand column, there's no color on anything? Like all the icons are monochromatic. So it's like, now where's my pictures folder? Where's my movies folder? Like everything is just a little tiny gray blob for those of us who are getting older with our vision. Yeah, I love this one. Newly designed monochrome source list and toolbar icons, because having color icons for people doing color images and color adjustments, because photographers don't respond well to color, we need all of our user interface elements to have no color, because that's going to make it easier to find things, is a lack of color. It's so clean, it's so sleek, it's streamlined. Come on, stop treating us like we're effing idiots.
You know what? I don't even care. Seriously, I'm done. I'm over it.
I'm not even going to update it.
I mean, listen. This is not something, and
I never thought I'd hear you say this, but okay.
There's no joy in my voice, none, absolutely, positively, no joy. I hate that this has happened. I've invested as much or more time in Aperture than anybody. Maybe you and I together have about as much time as anybody.
No, you have me beat. But I love this app too. I've produced a lot of books and training material, and I did the official Apple book even.
Yeah, I did the first and the second Macworld training course, the first ever live training course. Sat in on the first T1, T2, T3 training courses. Was the first when the first group of T3 certified
just
teachers.
Face it, Scott, we hate this application.
Yeah, I technical edited 9 different books on Aperture. Ran the first Aperture blog. Did Creative Live Aperture, 3 titles for Lynda.com. Nobody can say that I was not like the #1 Aperture fan. In fact, I was regularly attacked for it. So the fact that I'm leaving Aperture should tell you that something very bad has happened. And I'm moving to Lightroom 4. And now let's stop talking about Apple for a minute. I want to talk about Lightroom 4.1.
Sure.
And I'm going to talk about some of the reasons I'm moving. And primarily, here are the reasons. The raw conversions are better, period.
Yeah.
Now, here's what I used to say. I used to say, they're different. They're not better. One's not better than the other. It's sort of like, apples and oranges. It's all fruit. Which do you care for?
They're better.
But now it's clear to me that the Aperture RAW converter is inferior to Adobe's RAW converter, period. I've done the side-by-side test. It's even more true when you get into the new cameras like the 5D Mark III, the D800, the D4.
And
Now,
I just want to clarify for folks too, because some folks, you know, some folks Lightroom's not the right solution, or they don't like it. That camera raw converter is used in Photoshop, Lightroom, Photoshop Elements, After Effects, even. You know, like you've got that same engine throughout. So when you're talking about that Lightroom engine, it's that camera raw engine that's throughout the Adobe product line, and they update it in a unified manner, which is cool.
yeah, so that's number one. Number two, the various tweaks to Lightroom, making it faster, making it easier to use the develop module to do 97% of what I'm ever going to do to an image in post.
Yeah.
It's the one thing I don't like, and the reason I stay with Aperture for so long is there's no managed library. But I think I've figured out a system, and I'm going to be doing some posts, and you and I are going to be doing some training on this, how to
Yep.
move from Aperture to Lightroom. I
Yep.
think I found a system that will keep me safe.
My Photoshop book goes to print next Wednesday, and then I turn my attention to Lightroom.
Yeah. But so, that's the reason. So I'm not a guy moving to Lightroom because I'm an Apple hater. I'm a guy moving to Lightroom because Lightroom is better and I use the best tools, and I don't just, blindly follow whichever brand, you're supposed to follow.
Well,
Lightroom is a better tool in my opinion now, and it integrates very well with Photoshop CS6, and we've already discussed on a previous show that CS6 is a must-have upgrade.
yeah.
So now you add the video capabilities that both Lightroom, CS6, and of course After Effects have, and all these cameras producing video. It's a done deal. It's over.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's Adobe time, and I have never been a big fan of Adobe on this show. No one can ever say I've
Yeah.
been an Adobe fanboy, but they have the best tools now, so I'm going to them. Now, if company XYZ shows up a year from now and they have better tools, I'll switch to those.
Well, and so here's the good news. As you're looking at Lightroom or some of the other Adobe photo products, one of the things that stands out for me is I love the shadow and highlight recoverability inside of RAW, and then you toss in vibrance where you can bring out the selective saturation. And I know you're a big fan of clarity, I believe, right?
Oh, the freaking new clarity slider, dude. I mean, you can with the highlights and the shadow slider, the clarity slider, and the contrast slider, you can do 99.9% of what you need to do to a photo if you're a good photographer and get it right in camera and move on.
Yeah. And the stuff that I always loved about Aperture, the book publishing and the sharing, they really have caught up on that front at this point. The other thing that I do still like about the Apple ecosystem is the ability to access your media library throughout. Although the reason why I use that were apps like Apple Mail and iWork, and I run my business using iWork, and that thing hasn't been updated since 2009. It's
Yeah.
They took the '09 off the official iWork book, which I wrote, and they're still selling it. But it was 2009 the last time that app saw an update. We're coming up on 2013,
Well, they did finally promise that in iOS 6 that we'll be able to do better cloud integration of those documents.
which is
It'll catch
good.
it'll catch up to what we could have been doing in Google Docs for the last 3 years.
Yeah, yeah. So it's scary for folks. I think the good news is that the vast majority of our listeners are like, oh yeah, it's about time. We've been using Lightroom forever. For those of you that are on the Apple ecosystem, I still think iPhoto is a great place for a lot of folks to start. There are still reasons to use Aperture, but what really scares me, and when you I'm not going to go down the video path because most of our listeners don't care about it, but here's what really stands out when you look at the Apple announcement, if you just look at it objectively, and that is the bulk of the time was spent talking about iOS 6, or how much more the new operating system is like the iOS operating system.
Right.
And the laptops, great. They look really nice, and I think they did a nice job there. But what about the other products that people rely on for professional workflow? So, the iMac is more than a year out, no update. The Tower there was such a negative reaction to the Mac Pro update. They had labeled it new, that the next day they went off and removed the new label from the store. There was so much backlash of like, you really can't call taking a machine that was basically a 4-year-old architecture, bumping up the processor, not putting in USB 3, not putting in Thunderbolt. I thought that it wasn't because these sort of boards were readily available. I just found out this morning in talking to a colleague that there's a line of PCs from a manufacturer called Rain that have Thunderbolt in a tower, that there are chipsets available, and Apple just didn't choose to use them.
And I have to say that, when I voiced my opinion, as is my right, and in my opinion, my duty, on Twitter about all these announcements, all the Apple fanboys were like, "See, it says new in the Apple Store. You jumped the gun. You take it back, take it back."
And the next day they took new away.
And now I have not heard from any of those fellows. Come on, boys, where are you? What do you got to say now? I mean, listen. Again, I'm not happy about this. I wish that they had a brand new tower. I wish that we had Aperture 4. I wish that it was all different, but it isn't. And I'm old enough to know that wishing doesn't get you anywhere. So it's time to move on. You're going to hear a lot more about Lightroom on this show. You're going to get free presets from us. You're going to get some training from us. This is going to become a more Lightroom-centric place. If you're an Aperture person and you want to be mad, go ahead and send me a nasty email. I don't care, because I'm not going to be worrying about it.
See, Scott, I'm glad you're here, because you always invite them to send the nasty emails to you. I generally only get the nice emails of people like, yeah, I feel your same pain, or thanks for voicing.
You got to put your big boy pants on. It's time to look at things objectively. There are other Aperture resources, Aperture Expert. Go out there and find those guys. We're going to be talking about Lightroom from here on out. Yeah. We're going to be talking about Photoshop a lot, which we were going to be doing anyway.
Right. I've always used Aperture and Photoshop together. I used it because I liked Aperture's organization ability, and I like the managed library. We're going to figure this out. And here's one thing I do know before we get to our first break, is that I've had the joy of working with Adobe on a handful of their products pretty closely. I've written some documentation. I've helped them develop one of their training programs. The one thing that stands out about that company more than any other is their ability to listen and be transparent at the same time. I've just heard them flat out say, you know what, we don't have this right. What should we do? And then they fix it with the next version. I've seen them just, say, you know what, we're glad you love this, but what would you still like to see? I've never seen a company so transparent with about what they're doing. And if you want to keep up on this, here's a couple of cool things to follow. Make sure you look at Adobe Labs, labs.adobe.com. This is where you get the sneak peeks of a lot of the tech. Like, this is where you can get the new camera raw almost a month before they officially release it. So, like, it was in beta, and if you went to Labs, you would have had support for all of those cameras that didn't officially get supported until a couple of weeks ago. This is a place where you get all that pre-release software. They're like, hey, we're still working out a few of the bugs, but if you want support for your new camera, you could download it right now. We think it works. They're doing the same sort of thing with Creative Cloud. One of the things most people don't realize is that as new features get ready for what will be CS7, we'll start seeing those features released to Creative Cloud people right away. And so because those people are on subscription, you won't have to wait for the new features to come out a year later. You'll get them as soon as they're ready, which is kind of cool. And so I think that that's going to really change the way that we're seeing. And I'm just tired in my business of not having the latest tool as soon as it's ready and being held hostage by not knowing what technology I should invest in. Apple spent months, if not years, talking trash about USB 3. And so, we didn't buy into that storage because it wasn't going to work cross-platform in our shop. We have Macs and PCs. We didn't really buy USB 3. Now all of a sudden, USB 3 is awesome. It's like, thanks. Thanks for telling me don't buy this. And then you go and support it.
Well, see, the vast majority of our audience won't have the problems we do. I mean, that's something very important to point out, Rich. We're professionals. We have staff. We have budgets to put together. We have capital investments to think about for year after year, running pro forma cash analysis for the next 5 years. So we're thinking about stuff. And Tim Cook recently said, the new CEO of Apple, we're going to double down on secrecy, which was yet another sign that he said, I don't care about you pros out there. Because if he cared about pros, he wouldn't double down on secrecy, because it's not the media he's keeping the secrets from. It's his customers he's keeping the secrets from. And we can't know how to plan going forward. Now, if you're just a person who got a point and shoot, you're going to love your Mac, you're going to love iPhoto, and you're never going to you're going to wonder what the heck we were talking about.
Yeah.
But if you run a business like Rich and I do, and like some of our audience do, because I know I hear from other business owners that are in the photography space, this is bad news, and this is why we moved on. We do need to take a break, Rich.
I want one last point before you do that, which is a lot of amateurs grow into pros or grow into
That's
this as an
true.
industry. And so, here's the real truth. You go out there and you look for a job, as much as I love Aperture or iPhoto and think they're great starting points for a lot of folks, you will not find a job that says looking for iPhoto expert with an So you know what I'm saying? If you want to take all that effort you're putting into your hobby and maybe monetize it at some point in time because you know what, you love photography, but you're sick of doing work for the man, you might want to pick a tool set that lets you grow into a professional job. Now with that, Scott, I'm ready for a commercial break.
Okay, let's talk about a couple of ways you can share your photos, whether you've done them on iPhoto, Aperture, Lightroom, Photoshop, or GNU. I don't care. Viewbug.com is the place you can enter photo contests. In fact, there's a $10,000 photo contest sponsored by Photofocus at Viewbug. Just Google Photofocus $10,000 photo contest in Viewbug, and you'll find the link. And you can also just go to viewbug.com by clicking on the banner on our homepage. This is the real deal. We're giving away 10 grand's worth of stuff, and there's no entry fees, so there's no scam here. And you keep all the copyrights. We won't use your image in any way unless you win, and even then you get to keep copyrights. We're running the contest the way it's supposed to be run. There's other cool contests, and soon, very soon, the people at Viewbug are going to enable you to run your very own photo contest for your business or your charity or whatever you want to do. So keep track of what's going on over there at viewbug.com. Also, if you want to learn more about Lightroom, like I have been studiously studying the KelbyTraining.com stuff. There's a special code you can use, K like Kelby, T like Tom, S like Sierra, B like Baker, A like Alpha, 1 2 KTSBA 12. That'll save you $20 on an annual subscription. You can find that over at photofocus.com. Just click on the banner there and remember to use that code to save $20. But you can learn Lightroom, all kinds of stuff, even Aperture from our very own Rich Harrington over there at Kelby Training. And maybe someday you'll learn something from me over there. I don't know if they'll ever let me in, but if they do, I'll come.
Good. Well, let's talk a little bit about some other new tech that's come out. I know you have some lenses. We'll talk about those in 1 second. One of the things I got a chance to play with a lot in the last few days, I was on the Adobe Roadshow going to a couple of cities, and then I actually visited HP over in Colorado yesterday and got to go visit their labs where they test and configure technology. And I started playing on some really beefy systems and started just like to see the difference between adding this does this and whatnot. And I walked away with a couple of opinions that I think photographers need to think about as they're starting to put together new computers. These are cross-platform recommendations. It doesn't matter whose tech you use. One of the things that really stood out to me is that NVIDIA is making a huge jump in graphic processors. Actually, the new MacBook Pros went back to NVIDIA. HP, all these folks are really investing in it. So if you're looking at a new technology card, I was really surprised at how much faster this was making Photoshop. We were seeing just incredible acceleration on filters, fixing wide angle, all sorts of tasks that rely on the graphics card to speed up. It just was flying. I was really surprised what a difference a good GPU made. So make sure you put that on your radar as you're thinking about a computer or even upgrading your existing computer. The other thing that stood out is we're seeing this new sort of drive technology where they're integrating an SSD-like chip into the normal storage. So you're mixing SSDs with spinning drives, like a little SSD chip, and it's serving as a high performance cache. And what it does is it means that the files you're working with or that you're trying to access are immediately loading and being responsive without having to invest in all SSD storage. So just a couple things to keep in mind as you're playing with stuff. I definitely was excited by seeing that. I played with what USB 3 was doing. I'm real happy with where that's going. It seems really interesting that the tech we're just getting faster and faster, which is nice because you don't lose that downtime sitting there waiting for things to happen. Scott, any other new things on the tech front for people that are out there looking or thinking about shopping? I know you got a chance to look at a couple new lenses, right?
Well, we did get an announcement just, I believe, last night from Nikon that there are two new Nikon lenses scheduled for release. But before I talk about them, I want to briefly mention some very good news, at least from my perspective. The Canon 500 and 600 big gun lenses that we were promised last year, but which were delayed by the tragedy in Japan, i.e., the earthquake, tsunami, and nuclear fallout, are shipping and in stores now, in a few. And the 500 is on its way to me this very moment, thanks to our friends at borrowlenses.com. They secured me the first one. And so this is the Mark II version of the 500 and the 600 lenses from Canon. What's important about this tech is that they are lighter and they are brighter, and they offer an awful lot of enhancements, but they're also way more expensive. Now let's talk about the Nikon lenses. There's a new AFS DX Nikkor 18-300 3.5 to 5.6 variable aperture using the ED VR technology, which means it's even though it's kind of priced more like a consumer lens at under $1,000, it's really a pro lens. And then there's the AFS Nikkor 24-85. That's a 3.5 to 4.5 variable aperture. Again, EDVR. That's $600. That's late June for both those lenses. We haven't no way to have tried them yet, but we'll try to get a look at those lenses. I suspect the 18-300 being a 16.7 super zoom, it's always been a kind of controversial.
I call that my tourist lens. I like taking that out when I'm traveling with the kids, or I just want to have a single lens and not be switching things. It's a good daytime shooting lens. It's a great lens for when you're on vacation and you just want to have full coverage.
Yeah, it's a controversial lens because it's such a big zoom range, but I got to tell you, the puppy works good, at least the original version. I'm expecting this one will too. So the news is that whatever you're buying today, there'll be something better tomorrow, but don't fret, because I still know people using cameras built in 1960 and they're making a living with them. So you don't have to have the newest thing just because it's the newest thing. And I posted a tweet the day of the recording of this show, Rich, which happened to be the morning after Matt Cain pitched the first perfect game in New York Giants history, meaning he faced 27 batters and all 27 batters went down. It's a rare feat, only 22 perfect games in the entire history of professional baseball. And my tweet said, I wonder which brand of baseball Matt Cain pitched with last night. So we're going to do a whole show on what's the right and what's the wrong questions to ask if you're trying to advance your professional photography career. But in any event, all this new gear is exciting. Glad that we can talk about it. I'm going to take a moment here to segue to a couple of other sponsors who want to do it. I did mention borrowlenses.com. They've got the new 500 and 600, the new D4, the D800, the D800E, the 5D Mark III, all the cool new stuff. Plus, they got everything else. They got video stuff. They got as much video stuff as they got still stuff. So that might be interesting to some of you. You can even rent a red camera from these folks. Not that you would normally know what.
I just shot on one this past week. It's an interesting experience.
Not that most people would know how to even use the sucker, but there it is.
Yeah.
So that there's a banner to borrowlenses.com sitting on the homepage of photofocus.com, which, by the way, is updated 7 days a week, I might add. And SmugMug, the best place to share your photos if you especially want to sell them. They've got new features now that let you go and have the photos sent right to the print lab and then framed or mounted. That's something new. So check that out. You can click on the banner at SmugMug, banner at photofocus.com, or just go to smugmug.com and click on the Pro tab. If you want to sell your photos, that's the best place to go. Rich, back to you.
Sure. Well, on that note, you were talking about gear and, people getting so obsessed on it. I actually had an interesting experience this week. When I was out in Colorado, I brought a bag of point and shoots with me. I had a bunch of cameras sent to me to do for a review for a website coming up, and I was just playing with these, and I was amazed at the variety and how clever some of these cameras are getting. Like, see, on the Pro DSLR side, every time they start putting in a feature that does it for you, pros start getting overreacting. Well, that's what post-process for. I don't want that. Give me a pure image. And I get that. Like, some of these had these incredibly cheesy features, like take the picture and make it look like it's on a magazine cover. then I started digging into some of the menus, and I found some really cool things like panoramic stitching in camera where it guides you to line up the next images. And it did a great job. I was doing some in-camera HDR, and I opened up the results, and it looked very comparable to what I would be doing in post-processing. And it just started me thinking that we're going to start seeing more and more of this as, you know, these cameras start smashing together and computer technology starts going on the go, is what has to be done at the desktop. I pulled out the iPhone, took an HDR photo, and then brought in a Snapseed and processed it right on my phone of the Colorado fires, the forest fires. The whole sky was just literally orange, and then smoke, and got tons of comments and reactions to the image. And not a single person said, "What did you shoot it on?" They just were talking about the image. And it's like, wow, maybe it's time to rethink how technology-enabled photography might not be that bad. What are some of your thoughts as you look at all these innovations we're seeing on the, quote, low end?
Well, I do think that point and shoot cameras, personally for me, are redundant. I used to buy and use them all the time as a backup like camera or a pocket camera for vacation, and I have since sold every single one of them except for my Nikon P7000, which isn't even the newest version. I don't think. No, I do have the new version. I have the 7100. I still have that one and keep it at home. But for most things, I use my smartphone camera, and I am shocked. I am shocked at the quality I'm getting out of the iPhone 4S camera. And just to find out, everyone was telling me how great the Samsung S3 is going to be. So for the rest of you who are still getting like over the fact that I switched from Aperture to Lightroom, I also bought a Galaxy S3. Now I'm going to run both phones on Sprint, which you have the option to do, and I'm going to test both phones and see how they work simultaneously. We needed a third number at our LA location, so I just got it for there, and I'm going to use that camera, which I hear is spectacular in the beta test. But I got to tell you, Rich, I don't carry a point and shoot camera anymore because the stuff you can do with these smartphone cameras, you're right. I mean, I actually took pictures here in Vegas at a popular shopping center and sold them on Canvas.
Off
And
your
people
iPhone.
had off the iPhone. Yeah.
Yeah.
And people were like, whoa, those are beautiful. No one asked me which camera I used. They probably assumed I used my new 5D Mark III or something like that. But nope, it was, I got to tell you, the
Good
in-cam,
composition is good composition, Scott.
yeah. But here's another thing. And I'm not saying this because they're a sponsor, but if you have not downloaded the free Camera Awesome app from SmugMug,
Yeah.
you have really missed the boat because that sucker it's the best camera phone app in the world.
Yeah, you can lock aperture. You could, set where it's going to choose the white point, so to manually adjust exposure. You could shoot in burst mode. Yeah, I really do like that app. I think it does a nice job, and it's amazing what these cameras are capable of. I mean, for some folks who still may want to point and shoot, I definitely found I was liking some of the stuff that the Olympus did, especially since there were some raw options still in some of these point and shoots. I was surprised to find as robust raw support in these. I'd still love to see a smartphone manufacturer step up to the plate and say, you know what? You could shoot raw. Yeah, you're going to have to empty your phone a little more often than every 5,000 photos to make room, but you could shoot raw.
From your mouth to God's ears.
We'll see if it happens.
That would be, but you know why? I tell you what, if that happens,
It'd be the death of point and shoots.
It would be the death of point and shoots. It really would, because there's really not a whole lot of reason to mess with them. Now, the video is just as good off the iPhone as it is off my point and shoots. I mean, I think that we're at parity. It's just that the point and shoots being dedicated cameras,
yeah,
have a little better lenses and a little easier to handle if you're doing serious photography.
Well, I found some great burst mode shooting that really surprised me, and I really liked some of the in-camera processing. It seems silly, I'm such a post-processing fiend and know my way around all these tools, yet the in-camera HDR, I was just dealing with some tough sunsets, and this one camera didn't have raw ability, but it had in-camera HDR, and when I hit the button, it just went and took all three and merged them together, as opposed to like when I do an in-camera HDR on my iPhone, it takes a lot longer to pull it off. I always have to find something to brace against because there's a much longer delay, especially when I'm using the HDR apps as opposed to the weak camera HDR that Apple has on their iPhone camera. So I don't know. I mean, obviously, I think there's room for all. I guess what was surprising me in having not looked at any of these cameras in quite some time, I feel much more comfortable recommending to friends and family and others that there are some pretty dang robust point and shoots out there if they are looking for a dedicated camera. For those who are ready to step up from a phone but not go to a DSLR, technology has pushed a lot in a very short time. It's been about a year since I looked at them, and I was impressed overall with what people were doing.
Well, the technology is amazing, and I can tell you that Olympus is doing some great stuff in that category. They're also doing great stuff in the mirrorless category. I still love shooting the EP3, and now they've come out with a new lens. They've announced, I believe it's a 75 millimeter lens, which means there's the equivalent of focal length of 150. It's in, I can't remember, but that's going to be coming out soon. So there's all kinds of cool stuff coming out in the gear. But at the end of the day, I am spending more time shooting with my smartphones, realistically, than I am with my DSLRs, because I've always got my smartphone with me, and I don't. And here's the other thing. Now you got to know, I live in Las Vegas. I live at City Center.
There's lots of photogenic things around there.
Which is like you could do a 3-day photo walk and never see the same thing twice. But it's also full of wannabe rent-a-cops. We're talking Paul Blart Mall Cop on steroids, folks. And I was asked to leave a local establishment because I had, quote unquote, a professional looking camera the other day. That was the reason. And I went through all my usual, did your parents have any children who lived? Did you know that your mom and dad were also brother and sister? Does it hurt to be that stupid? And they still ran me out of there. And so I went back and I said,
with all those pleasant compliments, they still asked you to leave, Scott?
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. Now, went back to the same spot, to the same Paul Blart Mall Cop, and said, this is all I got today. Is this okay? He said, that'll be fine, sir. And it was my 8 megapixel iPhone. And I was making cool images with it. And he said, we just don't allow those pro cameras. And I said, could you tell me why? And he goes, well, one reason is they shoot video. And I went, mm-hmm. Walks away silently whistling without saying a word. So just be prepared. If you come to Vegas, which is like the #1 tourist destination in the United States, according to recent technology surveys, you will be treated like a criminal if you have a professional-looking camera, but you bring your smartphone out and everything's cool. You can do anything you want and no one will ever be the wiser. So that's why I can't wait for the day when we have smartphones that are actually equivalent to 5D Mark IIIs that shoot RAW, because then we can go anywhere we want and nobody will know the better.
Yeah. So, Scott, we've got one more sponsor to mention. Why don't you go ahead and take care of that?
Well, I just really want to mention we have the Amazon camera store set up for you right there at photofocus.com. We click on that banner and it takes you to Amazon. You will not pay a penny more for anything that you buy through that store from us than you would if you went to Amazon directly, but you will help us cover the expenses of the show, and the bandwidth expenses, etc., are significant with a show with this big an audience, so we appreciate your support. And I do want to just do a little bit of housekeeping, let you know that Photofocus does have a feed on Twitter. If you do not want to follow me because of all the things I do, you just want to follow what I say on Photofocus, you can do that going to twitter.com/photofocus. Also, the Photofocus website is updated 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We're going to have some more videos coming up from Rich on new Adobe products soon, I hope. Right, Rich?
Yeah, I've been recording them this week and through the weekend, so I'll be dumping you a year's worth next week.
All right, we have the podcast on the 5th, the 15th, and the 25th of every month. That's going on. I guess we're probably going to wrap up unless there's.
Yeah, I got one thing I want to toss out there, and this is I'm looking for some advice from you. I am going to be doing some traveling this summer with photography equipment. I'm planning on going down to South America for a couple of weeks for a mixture of photography and just some personal enjoyment travel. And I've been running into more and more problems at all airports when I've been traveling with photo gear. It seems to be on the rise. And so I've been trying different strategies, everything from, minimizing the amount of cases. So when they open up my gear, they could see everything. It's not in little compartments. I've been trying to say, what, let's pack like these cables and wires for the drives so that, it's just a much cleaner case. I've been, just trying to do, packing less gear, and it seems no matter what I do, and maybe it's just me and my general appearance, I get flagged. I get a hard time. Doesn't matter. Foreign countries, US, everywhere. Photography just seems to be getting harder and harder to get through airports when traveling. And I know that you travel. I know that our listeners do as well. I'm curious if anybody has any strategies. I think part of it might be is I refuse to go through the little microwave oven device that they have in airports now. So immediately when you do that, they give you a harder time.
Oh, well, that's why you're on the list right there.
Yeah, I refuse to have nudie pictures taken of myself.
Well, they no longer take nudie pictures, and I will tell you that since they've implemented those, I think things are faster. Now, I got to tell you, I don't fly commercial much, if at all, these days. But I think you've outlined a couple of important strategies, Rich. No wires. The fewer wires, cords, cables in your bag, the less likely to get flagged, because that triggers thoughts of bombs to the TSA screeners. And having like big objects that have like screens and stuff in front of smaller objects cause them to pull things apart. But my best bet, frankly, is shipping everything. I ship everything. In fact, that's one of the main uses I have for borrow lenses these days. Is I take very little, if any, gear. I let borrow lenses ship to my destination, and I pick it up there, and I ship it back from there, and then I go through customs, or I go through TSA, just whistling, carrying a small bag, and nobody bothers me, because it's just like I say, the photography is being treated as a criminal act in a lot of places these days, and photographers are being treated like criminals. And the TSA people, this is their moment to shine. This is their power. And
I love the question that the number of times I get asked, are you a professional photographer? Like somehow that this makes me a security threat. So I've been coming up with new answers to this question, and I'd love to hear if you have any. So I've answered this question the following way. I say, I aspire to be. Some people consider me one, and maybe this is just my deep-rooted sarcasm that leads to more trouble. But I'm just curious, how do you respond to that? Are you a professional
you don't
photographer?
want my advice here. You do not want my advice here, Rich, because I say stuff like, can you cite with specificity each and every regulation contained in the CFRs that says it's a matter of security, whether or not I'm a professional photographer?
Well, I did actually pull up the iPhone app where the TSA does have an iPhone app, and it lists all of the items. And I started citing back that the items that were in my bag were not on the list of items that were required to be removed from my bag for inspection. They didn't like that.
Yeah, they don't like being told their own rules because A, they don't know them, and B, they don't care about them. But realistically, it's you're going to be hassled, so try to avoid the hassle. Ship the stuff if you can. If you can't, pack what you can pack. Do realize, though, that in my experience, a check bag is a lost bag.
Yeah, well, so, not even a lost bag. That's where the theft seems to happen. A check bag is the bag that has random things removed at many airports.
Yeah, but the cables to your battery charger are no good if your battery charger isn't in there. So I think putting the cables is the best strategy, Rich. All the cables go in the check suitcase, and then all you have is the devices. Fortunately, like for instance, with the 5D Mark III, the new charger is one of those chargers that just has the little prongs that plug out, pull out, put it in the wall, so you don't even have any cables.
Yeah,
those are always my favorite.
And do you use any sort of vaults when you're traveling? I always travel with a laptop and spare hard drives, and storage has gotten so cheap. But I'm sitting here looking at some of these camera vaults. 750 gig drive, pop the card in, it mirrors it, validates the data. I'm trying to decide if it's worth spending the money on.
I've never trusted them because every time I have, I've been screwed.
Okay.
Now they may be much better these days, but when they first came out, Epson was the first company to sell them. I was not a fan because they just didn't work. I think hard drive storage has become so affordable these days that your best bet is buying a couple of cheap $100 drives at Best Buy and mailing them back home after they're full. So they don't even go through customs or through TSA, and that's your backup. My other advice to people is CF cards and SD cards have become so cheap. that unless you're just doing some massive documentary project, there's no reason to not have so many that you can't not delete them.
Well, I keep my time lapse shooting habit, especially my raw time lapse shooting
Yeah, well, that's
habit.
going to eat up a lot of memory. But if you're not doing that, I try to not erase any
Until you
cards.
get home. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Now, here's a really important tip if you're traveling from the United States to a foreign country and back. You want to go to the US Customs website and download the forms that let you declare your goods as you leave and have the customs agents go through the bag. This is time you want them to go through the bag and verify. Yep, I had a 5D Mark III when I left. I had a 7200 when I left, and I had a 24-70 when I left. Because let's say you're going to Asia. If you come back and you don't have that form and you get jacked up by a badge-heavy customs agent, he can say, hey, you bought all those cameras in Japan and you can't prove you didn't, so I'm going to put a tax on them.
yeah, yeah.
So having that form
The
is the
carnet,
only way
right?
you can declare it. The other thing I want to mention about traveling internationally is be very careful about bringing your laptop, because more and more often countries are simply seizing laptops. You may or may not get them back. If you get them back, it may or may not be within a few days, weeks, months, or years.
So,
And
so
one
why are they doing that?
they're
Because they
doing that
can.
because they can, and because they're searching for things like child pornography, or they're searching for terrorist information, or they're just being jerks. But two friends of mine have had their laptops seized by Canadian customs and have not got them back yet.
Yeah, Canadian Customs gave me a heck of a time leaving the country. I was up there for a 1-day business trip, visiting Getty Images up there, and as I'm coming back, I had a DSLR with me and my laptop, and they said, "What was the purpose of your visit?" And I had the foolishness mistake of saying business, but I mean, I was only there for 1 day. It was an in and out, and they're like, "Oh," and they're like, "Well, you have a laptop. You need to declare that and pay taxes." I'm like, "Why?" "Well, because you brought in equipment for business use." I'm like, "You mean to tell me?" And at this point, I just had like, "You charge every single person coming through here who's carrying a laptop a tax?" They're like, "Well, if you use it for business." I'm like, "So nobody checks their email? What are you talking about here?" And they're like, "Well, you have this DSLR camera. You need to pay tax on this. You're in the photography industry." I'm like, "But I didn't shoot any pictures while I was here. And it's not even my camera. It's a loaner unit that I'm testing." They're like, "Well, you need to pay taxes. You own this." I'm like, "I don't actually own that camera." "Well, who owns it?" "Nikon." And they're just like, and finally she's just like, "Leave." I'm like, "Okay."
Yeah,
I've heard horrors
They'll
about
be
Canada.
they'll be jerks because they can be, and because they need the revenue.
Yeah.
So I would say that I have developed the mindset that when traveling abroad, I'm going to take a very inexpensive, clean, like $300 laptop.
This is the same reason why I've actually saved my old MacBook Air, so I could
Right.
check email and just transfer images off of a card.
Yeah. They can and have gone through people's stuff. And for instance, let's say you're flying to Malaysia, and let's say you got pictures that you made when you were young and stupid, and they're of your naked girlfriend. That carries like the death penalty in Malaysia. So you gotta be you gotta be thinking
Fortunately, I
about
don't
this.
have that problem, nor have I had girlfriends who would ever let me do that. But I hear your point.
You know what I'm saying? There are people that have I can listen.
Yeah,
If you use a Mac and you've checked into any hotel during a Mac conference, you know that there are people who have pictures on their Macs that they shouldn't, because
oh yeah, because
they are
everybody
so
shows up on the network and Mac users are terrible at actually like turning on firewalls.
they've got sharing turned on. You're like, oh, I didn't want to know that much about Joe's wife. And
I just usually limit myself to their iTunes libraries. Like, oh, that's a good album. I haven't tried that one yet, but I hear you.
there's a famous person who we will not name because we don't want to embarrass him, but he's a very famous person who's well known for having left some naked pictures of females on apparently his girlfriend at the time on his Mac at a Mac conference when we're shared by all. So
Nice.
you don't want to be traveling with anything sensitive. Let's put it that way,
Okay.
because you can lose it. And with the political turmoil in the world today, pretty much any place you go could turn into a flashpoint overnight. And if you've got your brand new top of the line MacBook Pro that you just spent $4,500 on, and customs decides to take it, it's going to be a sad day, and there's not going to be anything you can do about it. And here's why: they've got guns. So My advice is, don't be paranoid, but be aware and take precautions. And whenever possible, just ship everything.
Yeah.
Just ship everything or fly private.
Yeah, well, we don't all have that option, but I hear you. So, okay, well, thanks for that helpful advice. And for those of you thinking of traveling, it'd also be great if any of you want to send some comments in via Twitter or things of that. If you have some of your own strategies, we'd love to hear it. I also did get a response from two folks, Scott, who have some Lightroom workflows for us. So they're working those up and they're going to send those in. So if you do have some idea on Lightroom workflows that you'd like to share with two recovering Aperture users, we'd be very interested in some strategies for media management that help us who are less savvy with managing our media and want the computer to help us with that, some strategies that would help. I really appreciate you guys tuning in for this week's episode of Photofocus. Scott, you mentioned that people can follow the Photofocus feed on Twitter, but if they do want to follow you and all of the interesting things you say from time to time, where should they take a look?
I love the way you put that. Twitter.com/Scott Bourne, SCOTTB. And where can they find you, Rich?
I am on Twitter at RedPixel, RHEDPIXEL, and my personal blog is Richard Harrington Blog, and I do contribute to the Photofocus website as well.
All right, cool. Great. Thanks for letting me be on the show again.
Yeah, thanks again for joining us for this week's episode, and we will be back in 10 days with more.